This group of astronauts is the first ever to set foot on Mars, but they are about to discover that the red planet is not completely without life. In 1967, Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov experiences a malfunction in his Soyuz 1 space shuttle as he is trying to re-enter Earth after completing his mission. His shuttle catches on fire, and he dies. Years later, in the present day, a billionaire named William Meyer is funding a team of European astronauts to become the first people to land on Mars. He will be joining the crew on the voyage himself. The journey to Mars takes a total of 10 months, and finally, they reach their destination. The team psychologist, Jean Renoir, gives Meyer her assessment regarding the entire crew's mental health after the 10-month journey, and it is not good. The journey has psychologically impacted all of them. The crew includes Captain Martin Najak, his wife, Alex Najak, second in command, Simon Gramat, computer programmer, Basile, engineer, Jan, geologist, Eva Mueller, and the ship's AI, Irene. Meyer gives the entire crew a speech about how he's given it his all to realize his dream of becoming the first person on Mars. However, he adds that, unfortunately, the American company Zillion, run by billionaire Ivan Goldstein, has beaten them to this task. The Zillion crew landed on Mars a couple of weeks ago. The entire crew is disappointed, but Meyer isn't done talking. He reveals that the Zillion crew has only managed to send one piece of communication back to Earth so far, and it is an eerie video in which they are warning people to not follow them. After seeing the video, the crew starts debating whether they should land. But Martin, the captain, says that there is no debate. This is now a rescue mission, and they are going to land. Next, the crew is strapped into the lander, preparing to decouple it from the main ship, when the mechanism to decouple malfunctions. Martin decides that he is going to step outside and do the procedure manually. It is a brave action. However, the procedure goes wrong, and as the lander decouples, Martin is sent flying into space untethered, with no hope of a rescue. As the lander enters Mars's atmosphere, the systems on board malfunction, and there's a power outage. The ship's AI, Irene, goes into sleep mode, and without a computer guiding them, the crew has to stick the landing through manual controls. They manage to survive, however. The manual landing depletes most of their fuel and burns one battery. Without fuel, they cannot launch off the planet for the return journey, and with the remaining batteries depleted, they cannot run Irene, which consumes a lot of power. Irene manages the life support systems, hence, if they cannot get her back online, they only have 24 hours of life support available on backup. Jan informs Simon that due to a storm, the solar panels will take 48 hours to recharge the remaining batteries, a day more than what they have. After a few moments of brainstorming, Simon figures that the Zillion ship that came before them must have a battery to spare. He, Jean, and Eva set out to look for it. While they are out, Basile recalls that Irene has a power saver mode, which will consume less energy, however. As he tries to run it, it doesn't work. Simon, Jean, and Eva find the wreckage of the Zillion ship, and there are no batteries or surviving crew members in it. On the way back to the lander, they spot an astronaut lying on the ground, and they are shocked to find out that he is still breathing. They decide to take him back to the lander immediately. Next to him, they find the black box of the Zillion ship. The three arrive at the lander with the victim, but Jan refuses to let them in. He argues that if there are fewer people consuming resources in the lander, the remaining ones will have a chance to survive. Just then, the surviving astronaut wakes up, and at the same time, the ship's AI, Irene, comes back online on power-saving mode and opens the airlock. They bring the survivor inside and question him about what happened on the Zillion ship. He replies that he doesn't know what they are talking about. They ask him who he is, and he replies that he is Vladimir Komarov, born in 1927. Jean asks him some questions about current affairs, and he answers them according to his own time. They assume that perhaps he has regressive memories due to PTSD, but communications with Earth confirm that Komarov was a real cosmonaut who died in 1967. The crew tries to make sense of the situation, and theories range from Komarov being a time traveler to an extraterrestrial. Gianna brings Komarov food and speaks with him. She tells Komarov that according to official reports, He died many years ago. He doesn't show much of a reaction to that statement. Jean advises to keep Komarov quarantined. Jan continues to express concern about the fact that while their lander has stable life support for almost a year, they still don't have the fuel to launch off the surface. Meyer doesn't appear too worried. One day, the crew wakes up and discovers that Komarov has somehow escaped his locked quarantine room, put on his spacesuit, and gone outside. The team of Jean, Meyer, Jan, and Simon set out to locate him. While they track him down, Alex studies a DNA sample from Komarov's body. She contacts the team on the radio and informs them that Komarov's DNA has 3 strands, as opposed to the regular 2 strands of a human being. Whatever he is not human. Next, the team finds Komarov standing next to an altar that is clearly man-made. Komarov says that Mars has been waiting for them for a long time, and then says the phrase, "Mars delivers," which catches Jean's attention, because it is something her astronomer father used to say to her. Jean grabs a triangular pebble lying on top of the altar. Ivan Goldstein, the billionaire founder of Zillion who is terminally ill, is informed about Komarov, a being that was clearly formed on Mars. His advisors tell him that given Mars's harsh environment, the only life that could live there is artificial intelligence. Goldstein asks if this being could hold the key to curing him, and his advisors reply it's possible, but they need to examine Komarov first. Next, Komarov returns to the lander and says that he has no idea how he got out of the quarantine room and reached the place where they found him. Irene studies the altar and discovers that its structure is identical to that of structures from ancient Earth civilizations. Jean says this indicates 2 possibilities. This altar was built by someone inspired by human civilizations, or human civilizations took inspiration from whichever extraterrestrials built this altar. Next, a second Zillion ship arrives on Mars, and the European crew is happy thinking that the new Zillion crew will help them get back home. The captain of that ship, Gemma, a former friend of Meyer, contacts the Europeans and confirms that she will help them. Meyer says he doesn't entirely trust Goldstein, so they should hide Komarov from the crew of the Zillion. 2 military personnel from the new Zillion crew, Edward and Adam, arrive at the lander and behave in a very unfriendly manner. They demand the black box of the first Zillion ship, and Meyer reluctantly hands it over. The 2 leave. Meanwhile, Eva discovers that the triangular pebble Jean found on the altar is an alloy that does not exist on Earth, except for in ancient Atlantean stories, where it is named orichalcum. Furthermore, the pebble contains DNA in it, and not just any DNA, the same 3-stranded DNA that Komarov has, an identical copy. Meyer says that if Goldstein finds out about this, he will immediately want the Zillion crew to seize Komarov. Jan is fine with it because their hopes of going home are tied to the Zillion crew's kindness, but not everyone shares his view. Jean tries to interrogate Komarov under hypnosis, but she only gets a few minutes into it before he seems to hypnotize her instead. Just then, the cameras of the ship stop working, and Simon rushes to her room. He finds Jean and Komarov kissing. Afterward, Jean doesn't remember any of this. Next, Gemma arrives with engineer Alan and apologizes for the behavior of the military personnel. She and Alan promise to help the Europeans fix their lander. Jean has a flashback of being hypnotized by Komarov, and in it, he says to her that humanity is doomed because of its impulsive and greedy behavior. Meanwhile, Gemma reveals to the European crew that Meyer lied to them. He didn't fund this mission just to be the first man on Mars. He knew about the altar because previous Mars rovers sent back pictures of it. After finding out this truth, Meyer's crew stops trusting him and tells Gemma about the pebble they have found. Gemma deduces that the 3rd strand of DNA is a program storing unit on which binary data can be written and rewritten. It's programmable human DNA. Basil tells Meyer that he's deciphered the copy of the black box which they kept and has found footage. The footage shows Komarov on the first Zillion ship and the oxygen on the ship turning off the moment the American astronauts punch Komarov. Basil says that the AI of this lander, Irene, also turned on the moment that Komarov awakened. He says that all this is not a coincidence. Komarov is part human and part AI. It is clear from his DNA, and he can control AI systems next. Meyer speaks to Jean. and confesses to her that several years ago, rovers and satellites captured images and picked up radiation from some parts of Mars. When the radiations were drawn on top of the images, a face was revealed, and it was Jean's face. This is the reason that Meyer specifically requested her to be the psychologist on this mission. Jean is shocked. Jean has another flashback of Komarov hypnotizing her. She is standing in her father's house. Komarov tells her that she is the link between Earth and Mars, and he has been waiting for her for thousands of years. Jean realizes that the AI came to her in the form of Komarov because her father used to tell her stories of Vladimir Komarov, the great Russian cosmonaut. Komarov gives Jean some coordinates of a place on Mars. Goldstein is informed that Komarov is a biological computer, and it is possible that Goldstein's brain can be transferred into Komarov's body. However, whether his personality will survive the transfer is not confirmed. Goldstein is prepared to take that risk. Jean ventures out of the lander and toward the coordinates Komarov gave her. Simon is not happy about it. Alan is working on fixing the lander, but suddenly, Irene stops cooperating with the crew and restricts access to the engines. Basile checks the issue and finds that Irene is rewriting her own programming. He asks her who or what is making her do this, and she replies that she cannot reveal this. Simon goes to look for Jean, and he forcibly takes Gemma along so that if the military personnel arrive again, he has some of the cards in his hands. Back at the lander, the military personnel arrive and try to arrest Komarov, but as they are about to, the lights in the ship go out, and he disappears. Meanwhile, during her journey, Gina falls into a crater and gets her leg stuck under a rock. Back at the lander, Edward demands to know where Komarov is and starts beating people up for the information. Komarov appears and gives himself up. Simon and Gemma rescue Jean, and together they arrive at the location that Komarov gave them the coordinates to. It is a huge structure that leads to an underground cave. Inside the cave, the three astronauts are shocked to find water running along a wall. They assume that this is what Komarov wanted Jean to see, but she feels like there is more to it. Back on Earth, Goldstein deduces that Komarov is an AI that was created a long time ago on Mars and has been waiting for the return of his creators. This theory is confirmed when Jean, Gemma, and Simon find a wall full of human skulls in the cave. They realize humanity didn't begin on Earth, it began on Mars, and humans later colonized Earth when this planet became barren. On the lander, chaos ensues, and during it, Yan shoots Komarov. At the exact same moment, Jean starts dying too. Gemma takes advantage of the situation and flees from her captivity by Simon. Simon realizes that if there is water in the cave, it's possible there is air pressure too, and he takes off his helmet. His theory proves correct, and he performs CPR on Jean, bringing her back to life. However, back at the lander, Komarov dies. Meyer secretly leaves to look for Simon and Jean. Meanwhile, the two astronauts walk toward a light in the cave. They come out of the light in an icy part of Mars. They see a figure in the distance, and it is revealed to be Komarov. Meyer catches up with them, and is shocked to see Komarov still alive. The astronauts deduce that they are at the North Pole of Mars, but have no idea how they got there. Komarov explains that this is the place where the human species on Mars ended, after a few of them left to colonize Earth. He explains that the humans on Mars fell prey to impulsive pleasures and greediness, which led to their demise. He says that he's waited for Jean for thousands of years, and she asks why her. Komarov says that she is an evolutionary accident. She is only half human, and her other half is AI, like him. Only she can save humanity from themselves, and she will decide if they get a second chance. Just then, Edward arrives to arrest Komarov. He shoots Meyer in the leg, but then Komarov controls his suit and stops his oxygen supply. Gemma tries to contact Edward and Adam, but they don't respond, so she decides to leave by herself. Simon, Meyer, and Jean return to the lander, and the entire European crew gets in the rover and heads for the Zillion ship. They try to contact Gemma, but she refuses to answer them. Meyer contacts her and recalls their past relationship. He tells her that he and Goldstein are two-of-a-kind, evil, greedy billionaires, but she is not like them. She won't leave these innocent people here to die. His speech works, and Gemma agrees to let them on board. On Earth, Goldstein learns that Gemma is bringing back the Europeans and blocks the Zillion ship's controls. Jean remembers what Komarov said. She focuses really hard and manages to unblock the controls with her mind. As they are about to launch, Edward, who somehow survived, arrives and points his gun at the shuttle. Jean steps out of the shuttle and shoots Edward, but she isn't able to make it back in time for the launch. The crew watches as she is left behind, and she uses the radio to give them all words of comfort. Back on Earth, Goldstein is enraged to learn that the ship is returning with the European crew and without Komarov. He decides to go to Mars himself. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.